She is our speaker today. Jennifer is not here in person. Our speaker will be in person next week, so definitely show up if you can. Jennifer, I think you're in Dallas. If I maybe I'm
I'm
wrong.
actually in Montana today
Oh,
where it is snowing.
oh
So
God.
be glad for Texas.
Okay, we are completely jealous because it's been like 100 degrees for the last couple of days. So we would take your Montana snow, but we're going to hopefully get rain soon. Anyway, Jennifer helps people nail their personal brands, which is what she's going to talk to you about today. Get your search strategies going, how to prep you for interviews, get paid more, and land your dream job. And most importantly, she really helps you rekindle your passion for either for what you're going after or kind of figuring out what you want to do next. I know a lot of people here in this room, especially over the last couple of years, have considered a career pivot. And so this is the person that can help you think the right way to get to that pivot and help you design your dream career and live your dream life. So with that, we're gonna like do the little yay, Jennifer, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks, everyone. Yay. It's great to be here. Even though I'm in winter storm warnings, I get to be here with you virtually. So thank you for that. I'd love to talk about personal branding today. And before I dive in and share my screen and my slides, I'd love to know how you guys are defining personal branding. Is this something that you feel good about? Is it something that you avoid, feel yucky about? Feel free to let me know, drop your answer in the chat or let Shannon know. When I talk to folks about personal branding, some people are very resistant. And my hunch is it's usually about their definition, how they're defining it. So thumbs up, you guys are into personal branding, or thumbs down, so far, not so good. Okay, I see some thumbs up and some thumbs down. So maybe today's conversation can help warm those of you who are thumbs downing me, or at least this topic, and help add even more depth to those of you who are already embracing personal branding. Because whether you are job searching, as many of you are, searching for your next job or your dream job, or you're hoping to improve your circumstances, maybe where you currently are, you're looking for a promotion or a raise, pay, appreciation, respect, opportunities, offers, promotions, they are all factors that you can influence, and probably more than you may realize for some of you. So thanks again, Shannon, for having me. Should we dive in? All right, here we go. See my screen? Okay. Magnetic personal brand. When you can nail your personal brand, as I just suggested, you have the opportunity to attract more money, more respect, and sometimes that's self-respect too. When you figure out what you're about in words, when you figure out how to talk and think about your work, whether you're job searching or on the job, you will feel more self-respect, more fulfillment in your work, but you'll also attract more respect from others and more opportunities, sometimes often in the form of job offers. As Shannon mentioned, I'm Jennifer Shryock. I'm a dream job coach. I have a little bit of a tech background. I was hire number 5, the first non-founding hire for a tech startup. And I was able to eventually trace back why they came after me and recruited me. They had seen me talk in a group. I wasn't on stage even. I was just talking about my work and what I do. And they remembered it and came back and started recruiting me very personally for quite a while. So personal branding, it affects me personally, as well as job seekers. I wasn't looking, which is a very sweet spot to be in, where somebody gets a sense of who you are and what you do so clearly that they come after you. And that's what personal branding can do. What we're going to cover today, just 3 things. We're going to talk about perceived value, the perceived value of your work. We'll talk about what other people understand and say about what you do. And we'll talk about how much words matter and how what you say about your work can influence and steer your career. All right, so let's start with perceived value. Let's pretend that this pale yellow dot represents your work. It encompasses everything you do, the way you do your work, the actual tasks that you attend to in your work, the values you bring to the work, the way you show up, as well as the final product and the experience you create through your work. I showed this slide to somebody recently and she said, "Oh, it looks so manageable when your work is represented by a little dot." So let's imagine that all of the work that you're doing or all of the work you're doing for your job search is represented in this little pale yellow dot. For some people, we all know those clock watchers. We don't quite know what they do all day, right? It's kind of like this image where part of your day is distracting others, the rest of it is procrastination. Now, I know that's not you because you're showing up on your own time to further your career via this job club, but you know clock watchers, right? I've come up with this spectrum of perceived value of your work. And for those clock watchers, those procrastinators, they're probably over here on the left of this spectrum, this meter, where their work isn't perceived very clearly, that we don't quite know what they do. It seems like they're mostly just distracting others or watching the clock. As we move to the right on this spectrum, the perceived value of your work or other people's work increases. So I called this talk magnetic personal branding, and I'm defining magnetism as very clear. We could sum up what you do in a very clear way. We could say it in a repeatable way. The way we perceive your work, we understand the value of it. What's the heart of your work? And if that value that other people perceive relates to the work you want to do more of, your perceived value is even more magnetic, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, great. Okay, so the perceived value of your work will be lower if it's task-oriented. If the way you think about your work is a long list of tasks. By the way, if your resume is just a long list of tasks, your perceived value, even if you're a really hard worker, and that might be a plus in your personal brand, but if we think of you only as a hard worker who does tasks, that's a lower perceived value than maybe it could be. So perceived value of your work, task-oriented, responsibility-oriented. If you're just thinking about, oh, these are all my responsibilities. If it's a time exchange, if you're thinking about your hourly rate all day long, or when you think about your work, you aren't valuing your work as magnetically as you could. You aren't perceiving as much value to the actual work you do as might be possible. And then in organizations that are very time-oriented, the culture perceives work at a lower value than cultures where it's an exchange. What results do you get? We pay for those results. So the structure in most American businesses is time for pay, right? But even if that's the case, even if that's the structure, if you're thinking about your work and you're sharing that way of thinking with those around you in a more magnetic way, in a higher value way, then it's going to affect your personal brand. Of course, I also added, if you're disengaged, if you're watching the clock, pre-pandemic, you probably know these stats. The numbers of Americans who are actively disengaged, let me check it, 68% of Americans were actively disengaged while at work. And worldwide, that was 85%. So we were doing better. But of course, if you're actively disengaged at work, then you and others probably aren't perceiving your value as highly as we could. Now, on the other hand, your work's perceived value will grow in magnetism. It will feel more valuable to people if it's clear what you do. If what you do is memorable, oh, you solved a problem for me. You saved us during that PR crisis. Something like that is memorable, and we're going to remember that. If you're actively engaged at work, it'll be even more magnetic if your work solves a problem, if your work creates a desired outcome, if there's a clear business case for your work, if it's value-oriented rather than task-oriented or a time exchange. So there are things you can do to improve your own sense of the value of your work. And research shows that 3 factors: if you are learning, if you are taking initiative, and if you are helping someone, you will derive more of a sense of value from your own work. That will grow even further if you're learning something that will help you skill up, will help you get closer to the outcome that the business for whom you work is working toward, what they deliver. The closer you are to the end product, or the clearer you are in relation to the end product, the more of a sense of value we're going to have about your work. So remember, organizations don't hire people just because you're nice. I'm sure you are, and that's wonderful. Or just because you're a hard worker. It tends to be more of, we want to understand, well, first, from the company perspective, we're going to hire somebody to solve a problem. And the clearer you are on what that problem is and why they need it solved, the more value you and others will ascribe to your work. How are we doing? Any questions here?
Not seeing anything yet, but I'll keep an eye out and I'll let you know.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So what does this actually look like? I've got a couple of examples for you. One, Courtney, entry-level work. She works at a coffee shop. She hates it. She watches the clock, drudges through the day, and she actively tells people, I'm just doing this job until I can find a better job. And when she started to think of this, well, wait a minute, there might be a different filter I could use and enjoy my day and bring more pleasure and value to my day. She shifted her thinking and thought about how she's making a difference. So remember, the 3 factors are: if you're learning, if you're taking initiative, and if you're helping someone. And while she wasn't learning very much for her eventual career, she did decide to really focus on the other 2, to take some initiative and to focus on helping others. And of course, that was a fun shift. She started to think about how she brought joy to commuters' days by remembering their name, remembering, kind of that norm effect from Cheers. Hey, great to see you. You're regular today, and how she could bring joy to them through their caffeinated beverage. And of course, they started to appreciate her more. She started to feel better. Her coworkers started to shift in a more positive way. And it won't surprise any of you that people started to recruit her. Hey, I really like your vibe. Are you interested in doing something else? So that's an entry-level example of just shifting the way you're looking at your work, and thereby increasing your own sense of value and helping others perceive your value in a more magnetic way. Here's another example. And I put a bunch of language up here. I'm not reading it. You don't need to either, but I thought if you wanted to review these slides, it might be handy. So Cheryl was on kind of the other end of the career spectrum. In her middle ages, corporate executive, an industry expert. And she had, for many years at her large organization, been a darling. But several years ago, the way she described it to me was she'd been put in a corner. At about the same time, a whole bunch of new EVPs came on, executive vice presidents came on. So their perception of her was that she was not a darling at all, that she was really surviving in her job by the grace of her boss. So she had a powerful boss, and Cheryl felt that she could be fired any day, and that she only had her job by the grace of her boss, and everyone else kind of felt that way too. So she came to me to get help finding another job, because that felt like such a dead end. And she did very well. She got lots of interviews and lots of offers. And then she thought, well, okay, if I can get job offers with ease, then what have I got to lose? Why don't I experiment from within? And she started to think about how she could shift her own perceived value within this organization that she'd already spent a couple of decades in. And so one day in a budget meeting, she spoke up about an idea she'd presented to her immediate supervisor a couple of years ago, and who she understood that her immediate supervisor had presented it to the higher ups. Nobody had responded. Nobody had heard about it. Her boss kind of naysayed it too. But when she spoke up in this meeting, when she decided, I don't have anything to lose, shift my behavior, they heard her. They heard her. And I can't remember if it was the COO, somebody up high was in that budget meeting. And within a month, they had hired an organizational expert to come in and reorganize the whole section of their organization based on her idea. And then spent 18 months implementing that. So she decided to shift how she was perceiving her value and help others shift just through her behavior. And big things started to happen in one of those huge organizations where it's really hard to make change. Granted, it took a while, but really it was the filter through which she was thinking about her work. All right, so that's the end of this section of perceived value. Do you have any questions about this kind of magnetic scale, or what any of you might do to increase the perceived value that you're experiencing in your job or your job search, or that others are experiencing?
Y'all are welcome to pipe up if somebody has a example of something that you did that maybe turned things around for you. No? Bueller? All right, Jennifer. It will come to them.
Difficult. This is a difficult one, because I was going to say, and I didn't want to sound negative, but in reality, I have not seen a situation where someone like Cheryl would be recognized immediately.
It felt like years to her, Ruth Ann. So remember
no,
that
in that room, in the room when, yeah.
And so her perception, it's a great point. Thank you so much for bringing this up. It's a great point. When we started working together quite a while, months before that day in the room, she felt that that she no longer had a voice. She no longer had a place at the table. She was a little surprised to even be invited to that budget meeting. And so she had been quiet, kind of hiding behind her boss's laurels for quite a while, for exactly that reason. So she had brought this forward over and over for a couple of years in different rooms, and had been very silent in the big rooms, because she'd been told that she was too bossy, that she was too a whole bunch of stuff. And maybe some of you have experienced that too. And what she had done was really muzzled herself. She had stopped speaking. We worked together for a while to really unlock her voice before she could speak up. And then in that room, it was spontaneous. So it wasn't, just a light bulb moment and everything was hunky dory. She really felt kind of cage muzzled, I think is really the word, where she was frightened that she'd get fired every day and people weren't hearing her. And when she shifted internally and kind of changed her energy, the room seemed to change around her.
But
So
I'm saying to other people's reaction, it usually doesn't happen immediately.
yeah, I absolutely am hearing you. And what happened for her was when she changed, really shifted internally, it rippled through the room. Will that happen every time? No, it probably won't happen every time. She had made a shift, and she was as surprised as anybody that they were like, say more, say more. What seemed to happen was kind of this perfect storm. So it won't be an immediate thing for everybody. Even for Courtney, it wasn't an immediate thing. She had to practice this shift. And you're absolutely right. When when other people are involved, it may not be immediate. For her, it started internally, and then kind of magically, all of a sudden people could hear her. Make sense?
It does. It's just sometimes there's like personality roadblocks. I mean, my last position, it was like one person and they were powerful enough to halt my progress.
That's exactly what Cheryl had been feeling. And she described the people in the room as like the devil. Like they were so dangerous to her. And so they were such blockers of her.
Okay. Yeah, so, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I didn't describe that very well. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, Ruth Ann. Yeah. Her experience was so frightening and risky. And she had really become a shell of herself for some time. And then as we worked together to shift her thinking, and she started to think, okay, well, what if they do fire me? Like, so, there was some internal work first, but these people who had never seen her or heard her, when she shifted her energy, in this case, they were able to. I do think that that's often the case, that there's an internal awareness, or like a worst case scenario, I can handle it. And that freed her, and the room responded. It could have turned out that it freed her and the room didn't respond, but she was freed, and therefore anything could have happened for her.
I got it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for expanding.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's see, I see a hand up.
I wanted to, and thank you for, I came in late, and so I didn't hear all of it, but I think this is relevant. We had a person in Launchpad Job Club. I don't think it needs to always be within a work context. So this was a person like everybody here who is unemployed. And as you can tell, a lot of times people come to these meetings and they never participate. They listen. I'm sure they internalize the messages, but they don't say anything. They don't contribute. And every time we would have a situation where either we would break up into breakout rooms, or we would really solicit, tell me something simple that you did that made a difference. And this person, when she would talk, when she would share what she had done, the things were so simple and so powerful. She had such great ideas for staying motivated and for making a difference in her community, and to helping other people, and to reaching out and on a one-on-one basis, not always making a presentation to people, but messaging people who had come to the meeting saying, I remember you said you were going to have an interview. How did that go? Connecting, supporting, little things like that. And she established a reputation for herself within this organization as being somebody that had great ideas. And we invited her to serve on our board of directors for that very reason. We had a role for her that was going to be a relationship building role, because it was obvious that was a gift. But at any rate, I think that you can apply this whole magnetic brand thing in every single aspect of your life, with your neighbors, with your family. Anyway, that's it. Just wanted to, she's not here, so I can't, I'm not going to name her, but anyway, she was impressive. I'll never forget her.
Thank you. What a gorgeous example. You're absolutely right. And, you know, you're describing somebody who might be a little bit introverted. She didn't do the big group dynamic, but she individually or in small groups made a huge impact. And I really want to encourage, whatever your style is, how can you honor that? You don't have to be somebody you're not to make a huge difference, to be magnetic. You don't have to be the life of the party to have a magnetic impact on people, for people to be drawn to you. Not at all. And in fact, while I think that that maybe job interviews are a little bit, and historically have been a little bit skewed towards the shining light, the extrovert, more and more people are understanding that it's not just those bright lights who are magnetic and who make an impact. Your task, should you choose to accept it, is to, number one, I think, to see what you do as something more than just common sense. It may feel so natural to you that you can imagine that everyone else does it just like you do. And I assure you that they don't. Whatever you do, you bring a special quality, you bring an individual quality to it. So back when I said this little dot represents your work, it's not just the work, it's the way you do it. It's the values you bring to it. It's your nature. And the more you can bring yourself to work. Cheryl wasn't bringing herself to work anymore. She was still doing the job and she was still doing quality work, but she wasn't there. She was afraid. And so she wasn't showing up. And I encourage you to first recognize that the way you do things, while there might be others who are similar or who share your attributes and qualities, nobody is you. And really show up as yourself and recognize that there's something there. And then the second piece is to trust that there's value to it. We're going to talk more about how to help others see that value. But in this section, it's really getting to know what you're about and what you do well, how you affect people. It may be worthwhile to canvas people if you haven't gotten the attention that your friend in the job club did, where everyone noticed. Perhaps you could ask some people around you, what are the qualities that you appreciate about me, to help yourself recognize the impact you make on others and begin to see your own perceived value as higher than it is. These are great examples and questions. Thank you so much. Any others before we move on?
Excellent so far. Y'all are doing great. So is she.
Great. Let's move forward. Section 2, nobody knows how personal branding works accidentally. So for many of us, personal branding is an accidental experience. We've got a new color. This blue dot represents what people say about your work, what people say about you. You guys remember Friends? The sitcom? There was an episode of Friends where guys against girls, tiebreaker, and the girls get asked, what is Chandler Bing's job? One of their best friends, what's Chandler's job? And they can't think of anything. The stakes are high. This really matters. It has something to do with numbers. He carries a briefcase is all they can come up with. And then Rachel throws out a made-up word. He's a transponster. Let's play a little game right here. Think about how well your friends get what you do. And if you're job searching, this is even more important, perhaps. Do the people in your network get what you do? Or would they be fumbling just like Chandler's closest friends? Like, something to do with numbers? I'm not sure. So again, we've got the same spectrum here where For some of us, the perceived value of what other people get and say about you is going to be weaker, less repeatable, less memorable, less value conveyed. And for some of us, it's going to be stronger. Can we strengthen what other people say? Of course, that's the point of this. But for now, let's just assess where we are. What do your friends and family know about your work? What do they say that you do? What do your coworkers or former coworkers say about what you do? If you work in a large enough organization, they may not know what you did there. So think about how other people perceive and talk about your work. So show of hands, how many of you feel like, yeah, people get me, they know exactly what I do?
Mm-mm.
I'm seeing a couple hands. I'm seeing some heads shaking. Okay, so thumbs down if people don't know what you do. Show me your hands if people don't have a clue. I have friends I've known forever that I'm not really sure what they're up to. I know they're good people, but I don't know what they're doing out there, you know, in their profession. I know when they move up, we celebrate that, but wow, what is it? So there's a spectrum of perceived value about what other people get and what they say. And left to their own devices, other people could say anything about you and your work. Your personal brand and the perceived value of your work is left to chance when people are left to their own devices. You know, it could be that you did something embarrassing at the company retreat 10 years ago, and that's the only thing people really remember. And it's an easy story to tell. And that's become what people say. And that will be repeated if it's clear and it's memorable, even if it's not true and it doesn't convey much value about you. So if you did something embarrassing and they're repeating it, that's become your brand and it's repeatable, which is a good thing if what they're saying conveys value, if it's true. What we want is something more magnetic, again, clear and memorable. And then it's even better if they actually know what you do. They actually understand the value of what you do. So remember in the last section when we were talking about if your perception and other people's perception of your work is just a list of tasks you do, then there's room for improvement in your personal brand. If they know the outcomes you help achieve, now we're getting somewhere. If they know how to talk about those outcomes, we're really getting somewhere. If they can convey what you do by highlighting a problem that you solve or an outcome that you create, your brand is even more magnetic. So rather than telling the embarrassing story about you, if they can tell a story about the time when you saved them from the PR crisis, or remembered their name and helped them out, or remembered they had an interview, like our earlier example, and was thoughtful about that, that personal brand is getting stronger. If we know exactly what you do, it can get even stronger. Oh, you should hire so-and-so. He's great at. He got me this. Is much different than, well, I think she's been responsible for budgets before. That's not as magnetic as he took the budget, helped us understand it, so we made better business decisions and we were able to get our first $1 million of fundraising, VC fundraising. Now we're talking. If somebody's telling that story about you, other people are like, well, we need our first $1 million. They're going to start to want to pull you in rather than just, oh, I think they deal with budgets. Do you see the difference between kind of the task language and the outcome language? So whether we're thinking about your work or doing your work, if you're thinking about tasks rather than outcome, the perceived value is going to be lower. If other people are talking about tasks or worse rather than outcomes, the perception, the perceived value, there's room for improvement. Let's just say it that way. Okay, so what does this actually look like? Let's revisit Cheryl. So the big shift for her was seeing this problem through the lens of personal branding, rather than this personal thing like I'm I'm going to get fired, or
Mhm.
I don't have a voice anymore. She started to think of it as a problem. She's a problem solver. So that was the first relief. Oh, this is a personal branding problem. Okay. And then she spoke up in the meeting. That gave other people a chance to experience her the other way. As Ruth Ann pointed out, she might not have gotten instant gratification. It didn't feel instant to her after all those years. It always looks instant from the outside, but she gave people the chance to experience her in a new way. And then they began to speak about her and treat her very differently. And so here's the backstory. It turned out her boss hadn't been forwarding her grand idea, or when her boss didn't do a great job because she, well, one, didn't understand it. It wasn't her idea. And two, her boss was change resistant. And this was a big change proposal. So her microphone wasn't functioning on her behalf. Ultimately, and this was not instant at all. Ultimately, first they hired her boss to run the change, which, didn't feel good to our friend Cheryl. But ultimately, after several months of her boss resisting the very change that they were moving towards, Cheryl got promoted into her boss's position. Her boss didn't get it fired. It wasn't a coup. But Cheryl got to lead this company reorg, got $50,000 more than they offered. At first, she just reported to me that she's got another $75,000 within 12 months of taking on that position. So like this shift in personal branding unfolded in a really big way. And now that same COO or EVP, I can't remember his title, that she thought was kind of like the devil, that she was so afraid of, and that just seemed so obtuse and cruel. He tells others that she's the one to watch and the one to learn from. So this is the kind of shift that can happen in what other people say about you. They can go from saying you're bossy and you shouldn't be in the room to you're the one to follow. That's an extreme example. It can happen. So wherever you are in your career, helping others to see you in a more valuable light and talk about you in a more valuable light will serve you. It can influence outcomes. So the working definition of personal branding that I was always taught is that personal branding is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Maybe some of you have heard that. It's attributed to Jeff Bezos. And this section is all about what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And there are problems with that, right? One, you're not in the room. Two, you don't know what they're saying. If they're saying good things, then you've got a strong personal brand. If they're not saying anything, or they're not saying valuable things, then your brand isn't as strong. So I want to move into another section because it is so hard to talk about work. Most people struggle to talk about their own work, much less yours. So even if they've got the best of intentions, what other people say about you when you're not in the room may not be as strong unless you're helping them along, which will lead us into the next section. But before we go there, let's open it up. Any questions, comments, stories? I love them. What you got?
Don't be shy. Y'all feel free to pipe up.
I had made a comment. I'll pipe up if no one else is gonna. I had made a comment, Jennifer. I dislike extremely, probably because I'm no longer working within that industry. The word brand, to me, it sounds like a label and it sounds very impersonal. And actually, I used to be a creative, and somehow I got funneled into the marketing stuff, and that is not me. I'm not a commodity. I'm not something to sell. So I see you nodding your head. I just hate that term. but you're making me look at it differently. It's like jargon that gets thrown around in the career sector, and it just sounds very impersonal, but
Doesn't it? It sounds so commoditizing.
very
Thank you, Ruth.
insincere, because I'm going to sell you this because it's got a brand. I'm going to sell you this. It might not really be what it's, Anyway, that's just me.
I appreciate it. I think your point is a great one, and I suspect that you are not alone in feeling that way. I hear that a lot. And so, yeah, let's reclaim this language and redefine it, because it is language that's used out in the world and that can affect you. And when we're resistant to the old definition, we might miss out on opportunities, in our own lives. And so, yeah, that's kind of my mission, is let's redefine it. Let's reframe personal branding to all the pieces of you. And while you could make a case that when you're on the job search, that you're the commodity that you're hoping somebody else buys, right? People can use that language, and that's fine for them. But for our purposes, let's humanize this. Let's get real and personal and really think about not just the final product you create or the daily ins and outs of your work, but who you are, how you do your work, how you support others, how you serve your world, whether that's the inner world of an organization or the broader world of humanity. And I really feel like when a lot of people, when we're talking about value, have this hierarchy of, like a brain surgeon has more value than a janitor or something like that. And like, I call BS. I won't have it. So yes, there's value to, and especially for somebody who needs brain surgery, that, right, a brain surgeon has a lot of value to me right now, but I also appreciate the baristas and the janitors and everybody else. And really, this is about who are you? How do you do your work? How can you think about it in a way that brings you more fulfillment and others more awareness of the value that you bring? And if you are relying on your work to speak for itself, Texas and Montana, are there places where the culture is stronger, that like other people should do the talking about you? You shouldn't brag. I think that there are subcultures that it's really powerful, that let your work speak for itself. And in some positions, that's going to happen. If you're a kindergarten teacher, we probably have a pretty good idea of what you do. And if the rest of the world is like me, you probably have a positive idea of that. Oh, you're a kindergarten teacher. But I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you've affected individuals' lives. So I've got a positive, like you'll have a positive color to your personal brand because I have an idea, and that's positive for me. Other titles might also trigger an idea of what you do. It might be wrong, but it might be an idea, but it might be negative. I think lawyers get a bad rap. Everyone has an idea what a lawyer does, and there are lots of lawyer jokes. So the perception really needs to be individualized, and we can help by bringing our whole selves, by noticing the positive outcomes of what we do, or the negative outcomes we help prevent. Both of those really work well. And so we get away from the commodity and we help others see who we are as people and at work. Is that helpful? Great. Thanks for bringing this up, Ruth Ann. I appreciate it. Anyone else want to comment or question or anything before we move on?
Comment in. Let me say, turn my camera on. I just recently lost my job. I'd been working at smart warehousing for a year, and they let me go. And I didn't realize my contribution was so powerful, and it goes along with this branding where we had to do an acceptance criteria for the QA group. And one of the things that I would always throw in is something beyond the generic, run the program and check for these results. And I would throw in some Linux shortcuts that would tell the QA group how to do it easier, faster, just basic Linux things that I had learned over the years that would help them do their job. And then once I was let go, I'm reaching out and saying goodbye to all the people that I worked with. And the QA people came to me and they were like, the things that you threw in there were so helpful and so powerful. It really helped me in my job. And I ended up with LinkedIn recommendations from the QA group just because I did a simple little, extra that I didn't even perceive as that hard to do, but nobody else was doing it. And that was just teaching people Linux because I realized they didn't have the background. And I just saw that as it fits right into what you're doing with branding, is helping others. And I didn't see it as any more than, as a senior engineer's position to teach. But it is very powerful, and it did bring me results as far as, being able to get recommendations. And that's very powerful when you're looking for a job, is getting those extra recommendations. But that's a good point. I appreciate what you're saying.
Carrie, is that how to pronounce your name?
Yes.
Carrie, thank you so much for sharing this. Yeah, remember when I mentioned recognize that the way you do something may be different than the way other people do?
Yes.
And what's common sense for you? This is just how I define the scope of my job.
Right.
But it's not how my peers defined the scope of the same position necessarily. And this is a case where you learned through what other people say to perceive yourself differently. Do you like that work? Are you looking for similar work?
Actually, yes. I turned on my LinkedIn profile and said I'm looking. And yeah, I was let go last Friday. I got an offer yesterday.
Congratulations.
I mean, it was a lot more money. But once I turned on my profile, my LinkedIn profile was all I needed. And the recruiters started hitting me up with jobs. And I guess it's really right now, the software industry, they're looking for people, looking for developers. So it's really a good time to come back in. But yeah, I've got a lot of things in my LinkedIn profile that I learned from John Michael a year ago when I was looking. And so my profile is out there. People are always hitting me up, but I can see where I can change that, make it even better with branding, because a lot of my job description is tasks instead of here, these are the problems that I saw. And I can see where that would help.
Yeah. So we're going to get into that a little bit more in this section. But Carrie, before I move on to the next question, I want to address that. I think, so your profile right now is part of your branding, right?
Absolutely.
It's one element within your brand. The fact that there are LinkedIn recommendations contribute to the magnetism of that brand. And you're absolutely right. So now if you take the job description language and shift it to even some of the quotes that you heard that are different from the recommendations you got, maybe it's just a different turn of phrase even. That's going to probably bring you in more and better offers. So yeah, timing's great. And it's great that you turned on your LinkedIn profile. Congratulations for the offer. And as we move into this next section, your words matter. And in your case, what other people have said to you about you can influence the words you use. And then it turns into this kind of positive feedback loop where now you're repeating what others said and helping even different folks to see you through a new light and repeat those things. So you're perpetuating this positive branding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer. Jennifer, as you go along for the remainder of the time today, if thoughts come to your mind about how to apply this in a job interview, I would really appreciate your comments. I have one of the things that you just said a few minutes ago about your words matter, or this slide that you have up, who you are, how you do your work, and how you serve others. I think that that's really important. And I would think that that would really be important in an interview as a problem solver and as somebody who tackles big jobs when they're dropped in their lap. That's kind of my forte. And so if you have any comments about that and about applying some of these principles in a job interview, I would really appreciate that, because I just got an email a few moments ago from a recruiter, and I have a job interview Monday with the CEO and the senior VP of HR with the company. So I'm kind of a little anxious about that. That's kind of a high level. So I'd really appreciate anything you have to say in the remainder of your, of your presentation today that might apply to that.
Congratulations on your interview. This is great news.
Thank you.
What great timing. This
Thank
job
you.
club really works.
Yes.
Great work. And is your name Tel?
Yes.
Okay, Tel, absolutely. I will do so. We're moving into how to talk about your work yourself.
Okay.
And you're absolutely right. So as I mentioned for Kerry, his LinkedIn profile is part of his personal brand, and it's a very public face of his personal brand. The job interview is also a huge part of your personal brand. How you conduct yourself, what you say in the interview, contribute to how other people perceive you. That's the whole point of the interview, right?
Right.
And so before I go into the section, where we'll discuss this a little bit deeper, I want you to just be thinking about how do you shift from talking about, like Kerry talked about, the job description is just a list of tasks. That's right. Every job description will outline the tasks and responsibilities you're going to have. Talking about those tasks and responsibilities won't convey very much information about you, except that you know what you're supposed to do if you go to work. We don't quite know whether you go to work, what you get done at work, or how you do it. So shifting from that language of, yeah, I was responsible, let's use that budget example. I was responsible for budgets and financial reports. Okay, good. You've done that. We don't know if you've done it well. We know you've been responsible for it. Maybe you're failing up. Maybe you got fired. What will convey more information in your resume, LinkedIn, job interview is when you talk about what you did with those budgets. And if you use those financial reports to help make better business decisions, save money, and you can give specific examples, that's how I want you to pepper your interview with those results stories, rather than just talking about what you've been responsible for.
Okay.
So that's the basic premise. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're so welcome. Excellent. Okay, any other questions?
Had an observation, Jennifer. It's more the idea, it's kind of flipping what you're talking about on its head. What Ruth Ann was saying, that she feels, like, ugh, I don't want to have this label. Unfortunately, you do have to have a label for LinkedIn. If you have bon vivant, auteur, adventurer, that's great. That could be part of those hyphens, but you need to put senior programmer first. And just because that's the way recruiters look at you. If you have the rest of it, fantastic. They know that you are those things as well. And that might also get you a little bit more in with them. Or it might be like, oh, this person's, I don't know, they might be a little too wild for this little tame company. But I just felt like that needed to go in there, because as much as we don't want to be put in a box, that's where we're put by recruiters. But after you get that job, definitely, shine your brightest, because nobody is going to be as great of an advocate for you than you. That's what I have to say.
Your words matter. We're going to go right into this section right now. That's absolutely right. And if recruiters need to know some things about you, make sure that you use those words so recruiters can understand who you are. Helping people understand that you're not right for them saves you all a whole bunch of time. So Ruth Ann, my understanding was you didn't want to be a commodity, and you get to choose which words you use. Shannon's absolutely right. If you can help people to figure out what category you're in or search for you, that's going to help your personal brand enormously. So let's get away from the idea of being commodities. Let's do really, and we'll go more into this, but use words that convey value. And on LinkedIn, especially if you're looking for more of that kind of work, then that title is going to help you. If you're pivoting, it's kind of a different game, right? Having your former title may work against you. So you want to be really thinking about what conveys the right and most value. Thanks, Shannon. Absolutely. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to move forward with this section. We'll have more time to talk as we move through, but feel free to speak up. Okay, so yet another little dot. This is what you say about your work. So we had a dot for how you perceive your work, one for what other people say, and now we're talking about what you say about your work. How many of you, people you work with don't even know what you do? It's definitely more common than you may think. And if you're relying only on your title, again, some titles have a perception, and you're kind of leaving it in other people's hands if all you say is your title, especially if it's something like account, transponder. We don't know what that is. So relying only on your title may not be enough to help convey who you are and what your value is. Another spectrum here of perceived value of what you are saying. So if you can describe your work in a way that is, again, clear, simple, conversational, repeatable, if you can help us see the value that you bring through your work rather than just that list of tasks. If what you say when you talk about your work relates to what you want to do next, what you want to do more of, even more magnetic. When I first started as a resume writer a long time ago, I didn't ask, what do you want to do more? What do you never want to do again? And it's very easy to create a personal brand that's very past focused, only the things you've done before. And that can be great if you want to keep doing those things. But if you want to do something new, be aware of that and edit how you talk about your work toward that target. So the perceived value of what you say about your work will be lower if you don't say anything. If you rely only on your title. If what you say is vague. I help empower women to live their best lives. A lot of coaches say something like that, and none of us quite know what it means. It's very different than I help people land their dream job, right? I help people nail their personal brands so they can land their dream job. So you think about that. If it's complicated or jargony, you may really know what your jargon is, but in a way, personal brand is jargon, right? And some of you have a very negative sense of that language. We're redefining it here to make it less jargony, I hope. But if your work has been described in jargon terms, then you're probably not helping people with looser ties, people farther from your immediate work, understand what you're doing. And it's usually those loose ties that connect you to jobs, because if it's your inner circle, you probably know a lot of the same people and opportunities, but the folks beyond that may need to understand what you do in order to connect you to new ideas. Yeah. Again, if you're listing or describing your tasks or responsibilities, if you're just listing a menu of services. Okay, what you say will be more magnetic if it's clear, it's conversational, it's memorable and repeatable. You've been hearing those a few times. Are you guys getting background noise? No, we're okay. All right. And it conveys the value of what you do by highlighting a problem you solve or an outcome you create. So you've seen those. I'm repeating those intentionally. We want to be clear, memorable, conversational, and highlight the problem you solve or the outcome you create. And then it's going to be even more magnetic if what you're saying gets to people who can introduce you to opportunities, who can introduce you to people, who can then introduce you to opportunities, who make decisions about your work and pay, who can hire you. So this to foretell, if you can convey value to decision makers during your interview, you've been more magnetic with your personal brand, right?
Okay, right.
Okay, so what does this actually look like? I've got a couple of examples here. I met Lou when I worked for a tech startup, and he and I were speaking on panels together at innovation and technology symposia. And whenever somebody asked what he did, he'd say, it's too complicated to even explain. And that wasn't very rewarding, I don't think, to the person who asked, because they didn't learn anything. I didn't understand what he did based on that answer. It was, my sense is that when he said that he was maybe hoping to convey some importance, but mostly he just hadn't figured out how to talk about his work. So he thought it was impossible to do. He just hadn't figured it out. And I can't help connect him with the right people or projects. I don't know what those are. I have a vague idea based on his title, but again, I'm not sure what it means. I finally cajoled him enough that he let me help him come up with a way to talk about his work. And here's what we came up with. So to Shannon's point, notice that we start with the title. I'm a Scrum Master. And then he gave some context. I help bring sanity to software development projects so we can get solutions into people's hands more efficiently. So he provided some context. Now, people who are in the software world don't really know the nuts and bolts of what he does, but they get a sense of it. Oh yeah, software needs to be developed. Somebody builds that, and Lou must lead those projects. Way more context and understanding than if he just said, it's too complicated to even explain, right? And much more rewarding as a listener. And now when I talk to software developers, and they say, oh yeah, we just lost our Scrum Master, or we've got so many projects, we can't get them all into people's hands as fast as we want to. I say, have you met Lou? I'll connect you on LinkedIn. Here's another example. Hannah left a sales position that she hated, and she was working in customer service while figuring out her new career path. So she was kind of job searching. And when people asked how that was going, she would kind of vent about how relieved she was to not be in the sales role anymore. That hadn't been a great fit for her. And then she'd kind of apologize. Oh, I'm not really sure what's next. So she was processing aloud. But again, it's the other end of the spectrum of what Lou was doing. She wasn't conveying actionable information to her network, who asked. They must care. How's that job search going? They sympathized, but they couldn't help. And so again, we worked together to come up with an honest answer. She didn't feel honest claiming a career she hadn't tried out yet. She wasn't even sure. She had narrowed down her career pivot to 3 different potential areas, but she wasn't sure yet. And so we came up with a way for her to talk about one of those at a time, so that if she met somebody who had connections in that field, she could at least get introductions and then start conducting more informational interviews. So she started saying, instead of, I hated that sales job, thank goodness I'm not in it anymore, but customer service isn't for me either, and I don't know what is, instead of that sort of emotional process, she began to say, I'm exploring a career pivot into interface design. I'm looking to meet people in that field so I can learn more. It's not the strongest personal brand because she's not sure yet, but it helps people understand what she's interested in right now and help her move forward in either validating that idea or ruling it out so she can move on to the next idea. Or if it's validated, start introducing yourself in a new way. She'll take a class on interface design or tutorial or something, and then start to talk about interface design as her thing. So since then, she's been interviewing and job shadowing people and learning a bunch to validate. And it was that shift in introduction that helped her get that opportunity.
Jennifer, would you talk for a minute about people that are hitting a brick wall with regard to finding the same kind of job they had in the past, and they need to expand their search by verbalizing their transferable skills a little bit more?
Yeah. So, one thing that happened with COVID is that some industries just went away. I have a client who is a musician in academia. And so she was teaching music and her whole field just disappeared. Basically, there's no field. She has a PhD and can't find work. And so in her case, she's pivoting. What she's learning is this field is gone. I need to pivot. I need to transfer my skills into a whole new realm. For others, my narrow niche is saturated or has shifted for whatever reason. I'm not getting access right now. And while I'm looking for similar work, I need to expand the where I'm looking and the way I'm talking. Is it more the latter that you're asking about, or are you curious about both?
I know that we have a couple people in the meeting today who've been looking for a long time. With one, it's not only, it's both. Can't really relocate. It already has a couple big market areas, but the skills, for some reason, that he hadn't been able to make traction with his considerable skill set. And the other one, I think it's just a matter of figuring out how to describe transferable skills into something that's not exactly what he did before.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. The foundation for conveying transferable skills is that you're giving context. And we've been talking about this a little bit the whole time, that you're not just listing skills or tasks or responsibilities that you've had, you give context for them that are outcome based. I use these skills to get this outcome, or better yet, you start that sentence with the results. I helped get this X result by taking Y action. And if you can do that on your resume, place all those lists of responsible for and list of tasks, and really give this context of I finished this thing, or I did this thing and it helped get a certain outcome. When you start giving context for outcome, even if you're looking for different types of outcomes in your next career, that's going to be more, that's going to convey more clearly how those skills transfer than just listing the skills. So give context. And then if you are pivoting beyond your immediate realm, and your target market, your target employers have a different outcome that they're going for, then talk about that. You could say, I got X result, X type of outcome in this last industry, and that would look like Y outcome in the new industry. So you want to get very explicit, but always toward the end goal. So if you're kind of hung up on maybe you've managed events, let's say, but I managed these events and I got these people, and you're thinking about, I made all these calls, and you're thinking about all of the tasks that you did. And what you're applying to is an events. Events have gone away for a while and now everything's digital. So you want to shift to showing how you apply yourself and get to the new outcome that you're applying for. Tell us a story. I inherited this situation. It was a tiny event. They wanted to get 1,000 people and they were at 52 or something. And I got us to 1,000 people in only 2 years or something like that. So if you tell that story, we're going to be like, oh, so-and-so knows how to grow an event. Wish I was doing events, but I'm not. And then you could say, I can transfer this to digital events. And here's what I've been doing working towards that. So if you're, taking classes or volunteering at digital events so that you can transfer your events management, your in-person events management to digital events, you want to list that and maybe include it right after the stories of what you did in real life. So you're giving context of what you've done in terms of the results that you achieved. And then you're giving context for how that can apply and what you're doing so that it will apply seamlessly so that you can hit the ground running. Is that helpful?
Yes, I think that was very helpful. It was to me at any rate. I hope it touched a nerve with the rest of the group. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for asking.
Hey, Jennifer, are you doing retreats? I just saw your website and your website's awesome.
Thank you. With COVID, I quit. But yeah, I'll pick them back up one of these days.
And you do resumes? You do resumes. Wow.
So I started as a resume writer. I'll give you a little context now. I started as a resume writer a long time ago and during the last recession, 07, 09. And I quickly realized that people need more than a piece of paper. People need reassurance for one, and support, and to not be alone. You guys know that. That's why you're in a job club and you're getting that kind of support. I quickly realized, wow, this is a deeper topic. A piece of paper is amazing, and it can really help not only other people. If the paper is well written, it can help do all of these things. It can help show the results that you've achieved, give context to the way you work so that target employers can understand, but it can also, I find, really help individuals see themselves in a new light. I don't make anything up on a resume. No good resume writer does, but because we're not bogged down by the voices of insecurity or failures that you've experienced or memories of something somebody said one day, it becomes an unfiltered, positive document. We leave all that off. And so the resume can be very helpful in seeing yourself more clearly, and then using that language in your interview, and in your networking. So I don't want to undermine the value of a resume. It's just that there's so much more to your personal brand as you're learning how you see yourself, how you comport yourself, how you convey yourself in your everyday activities, in your job search, during the job negotiation, etc. So I went back and became, I'm now a master certified coach and really wanted to help the whole human. But my heart still lies a little bit with personal branding because it just matters so much. It's how we see ourselves and how other people do. So I love the opportunity to talk about this foundational piece. And as we talked about before with like Cheryl's example, sometimes there's some mindset stuff that we get to unlock too. And that can happen through the filter of personal branding work. So thanks for checking it out. I appreciate your question. I'll try to do some retreats in the next couple of years. Any other questions before we move on? We're almost done. I'll go ahead and move on since we're having such good conversations, and I'll give us a chance to have one more towards the end here. So remember the working definition. Personal branding is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, and how problematic that can be if people aren't talking or they're not saying what you want them to. And I think a better definition is every interaction in any form is branding. So now we're not a commodity. We're having real relationships, real engagements, and even just the values you bring as you conduct yourself in the world become part of your brand. All right, so we started with these 3 little dots. And of course, our perceived value of our work, what other people say and what we say, can be weaker or stronger. And they can get more and more magnetic the more we can convey value clearly, the more we do it in an authentic conversational way, or depending on the medium. But ideally, when we are showing up for work in a magnetic way, and when we are talking about our work in a magnetic way, it helps other people talk about our work in a magnetic way, right? They borrow the script, we repeat what we hear, and these begin to overlap more and more, thus amplifying the magnetism of your personal brand. And when that happens, now you start to attract, magnetism is a fun metaphor, I think. You start to attract more relationships, better relationships, a stronger network, more opportunities, even internally. If the people you work with understand better what you're about and what you could do, you might get more collaboration opportunities. You might be assigned better projects. And in your job search and externally, you're going to be introduced to people who make decisions or who know the people who need folks like you. So we've covered a few things today, but really we can boil it down to just a few main topics. One, your work has a perceived value. Most people don't have a clue what you do, and what you say matters. And all 3 of these can become stronger, more magnetic, more powerful, and more influential in your career and in your life when you do the things we talked about, when you're clear, when you're repeatable, when you convey value. It'll help other people be the same. And then we've got that overlap, and your personal brand becomes something that everyone's appreciating and they're introducing you. So I really want to end with the awareness that your personal brand is not beyond your sphere of influence. Even what other people say about you when you are not in the room is within your sphere of influence. When you show up to work in a valuable way, and when you talk about your work, you're doing the heavy lifting for them, so they don't have to try to figure out how to talk about your work in a valuable way. They can repeat it. You're helping them perceive it. It doesn't, for most of us, start with the resume. That and the LinkedIn are powerful pieces of your personal brand. But remember, it's every interaction. It's how you comport yourself. It's the values you bring, the way you do it, and your awareness of the outcomes you help create, no matter what position you have or what kind of work you do. A magnetic personal brand that's going to earn you more money, more respect, and more opportunities can be built on a single simple sentence: how you introduce yourself when somebody asks you about your work. Okay, that's my last slide. Any other questions or comments?
Is that your current contact info on your website?
If you go to magneticoneliner.com, you're going to see a workshop that I'm offering on exactly how to structure, exactly what to say when you talk about your work. My standard website that you probably found is jennifershryock.com or rainmakerresume.com.
Rainmaker. Is that so? Is the information on that one your email and phone?
Yeah, I'll drop it in right here too.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you go to this website, you'll find my contact information.
I have the Rainmaker one.
Give it to you. They'll all come to me.
Thank
Oh,
you,
okay.
Jennifer. I was rushing to try to get it, but I'm glad you got there before me.
Hopped in there. Thank you.
Wow, what a great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
You have such a soothing way about you. I can see
Yeah.
why people are attracted to you.
Thank you.
Are able to possess, you've got good possession, let's put it that way, and presence, and a way much better than I can do right now. And we can't thank you enough for sharing your time and your expertise with our group today. And if you don't mind, I would love to get your slides so I can share them retroactively in next week's newsletter. I always like to, especially when they're good slides like yours that have a lot of information. So if
Happy
you're willing,
to.
thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you. I find that this can be a really stressful topic, and that the more I'm centered about it and the more I can bring the reassurance, my hope is that the more easily you all will feel empowered and able to influence your own personal brands. So thank
Yeah.
you. I hope
Thank
that
you.
was helpful.